Hi everybody, Dave here again, and today I'm building the Estes Chiller. Now, it seems like Estes changes what their skill levels are about every 5 or 10 years, and so they're calling this a skill level 2 rocket. However, this is easily built by a beginner. Okay, a lot of the parts are pre-assembled. There's nothing particularly difficult about this model. I think what they've done is anything that's skill level 1 is simply snap it together and it's ready to go. Skill level 2 requires some glue or something to those effects. Okay. If this is your first model, there's nothing to be afraid of here. You can do this. So I'm going to move the box out of the way here and we'll quickly go over the instructions and the parts list. Always a good idea here. Okay, so first of all we've got the engine mount and fin can here, and this will go together. And then this piece here will be the retainer, and this will screw onto the back here. Right, so we've got those parts. The body tube already has a launch lug installed, and it already has the shock cord installed. In fact, if you can see down in there a little ways, not very well under these lighting conditions, but it's actually right in the middle here of the launch lug assembly. Now there may be a little bit of glue here where the manufacturer has applied this. If you want, you can take a thumbnail and scratch off kind of the excess glue. The body tube is already pre-finished as well. It has kind of this opaline finish to it. There's no reason why you couldn't paint it if you wanted to. If you do want to do that, you want to sand the surface very lightly to take this gloss off. Okay, but I'm just going to build this the way it is. Okay, the nose cone comes in 2 parts, and it's got this really cool finish to it, actually. I like this. And then there's this base piece that'll go in the back here. So we got those. Okay, this is actually a clear stick-on decal, and this will be used to reinforce the launch lug assembly. And of course we have the main decals here. These are also self-stick, and you can put these on either to match the box or however you want to. And we have 3 fins, one of which has the same coloration as the nose cone. The other 2 are a navy blue. Okay, we have a parachute, and then this is basically modeling clay. This will be used to add a little weight to the nose. Don't skip this part. Generally, when this is included in kits, it means that the kit by itself is not stable and you could end up injuring somebody on the launch, and if not that, probably breaking your rocket at the very least. So don't throw this away and make sure you use it. All right, now in addition to this, you're going to want a ruler, some sort of pencil, a hobby knife or other sharp knife. And then we're going to need some plastic model cement. Okay, so you can get this kind, it's a brush-on style. You can get the tube style, which I don't have handy right now. Also, the gel type of super glue will work in most cases as well. And in fact, in places in the model where we're gluing plastic to the body tube, I recommend using this in place of the model glue. If you're going to use the model glue, just make sure you get a good heavy dose of it on the plastic so that it has some melting going on there, enough to bond to the paper or the cardboard here, the body tube. And we'll go over that as we get to it. Okay, so I'm going to clear this away and we'll come back and get started. So the first thing to do, our construction, is to put the fin can together here. And there are little tiny pegs in the sides of this that will fit into the corresponding holes over here. For gluing plastic to plastic, model cement is the best thing to use. Okay, you can use the super glue here if you want, but the model glue actually partially melts the plastic and welds it to the other side. And I'm using this brush-on cement. The drawback to the brush-on cement is that it often dries before you get done here, so you have to work fairly quickly with it. So I'm going all along the seam and then hitting each of those little pegs. I don't recommend dropping this. Okay, and also it's a good idea to make sure that whatever surface you're working over can stand up to glue. A lot of times I'll just use a piece of scrap paper, and I really should be here. My wife's not here to yell at me. Just quickly going over the other surfaces here that I had just done before, and try not to get any on the outside. I've got a little bit here. It's not going to affect the flying, but it does make it look a little less neat. Okay, and I'm going to quickly hit the other side as well. Now I don't see anything on here, but occasionally you'll see little bits of what's called flash that are just little bits of plastic that are from the molds. And if you see that on here, just take your hobby knife and trim those off. They can get in the way of your gluing. Alright, so now I'm going to put these together. Okay, matching up everything, and I'm going to hold this tightly here for about 60 seconds to give it a good start. 60 seconds have passed, and now I've just added a rubber band to this to keep it snug. And in the instructions it shows going on to mounting the fins, wait on that. You want this to fully dry. I would say for at least an hour before you go on to do anything else. Models that have this type of a plastic fin can often fail when you go to load them because you stick the motor in here and it pops these seams apart. Okay, so it's best to let this completely dry and cure, and we'll go on to another part that we can be doing here and come back to this later. So while our fin can is drying, we're going to come down here to the nose cone. Okay, and we're going to prepare this. Now this is where we need that little bit of clay. And if for some reason you lose the one that came with it, it's easy enough to get another. Just regular modeling clay works. Okay, and what they suggest doing is kind of squishing it around here. This is mainly just to soften it. Okay. They show making it into a great big worm-like thing. For this nose cone, you don't have to. Some nose cones come in one piece, and you got to be able to stick this down through a little hole. This is nice and wide. You don't need to do that. What I would recommend is kind of forming it into something resembling a cone, because that's what you're going to make it into. Okay, and once you've got that nice and soft, then we're just going to drop that down inside, and then take a dowel, or in my case I'm using the end of my knife here, just make sure you don't cut yourself on the blade end. Okay, and I'm just going to tamp that down really well. Okay, so that's really all you need to do. You don't have to add anything to it. Rockets of this size aren't going to generate enough thrust for that to come loose. If you wanted to be really paranoid about it, you could actually put in a layer of epoxy in there, but that's more than what we want to do in this video. Okay, now for this next step, we're going to put the base piece here into the nose cone. The brush-on stylus cement does not work well for this because there's actually a little tiny gap around this that has to fill a space. So if you have the tube type plastic cement, that'll work better here. Or if you have, again, the gel super glue, which is what I'm going to do. Whatever way you do it with, you want to apply the glue to the inside of the nose cone, not to the base. Because what this is going to do is any excess glue will get shoved up further into the nose cone. If you start with it on the base here, excess glue gets shoved up into the base here and will end up on the outside where we don't want it. Okay, so I'm just going to add a bead of glue right on the inside here. Okay. And it's too late now, I just thought of this. If you wanted to, you could also take a little bit of sandpaper, just some medium or fine sandpaper, and just roughen up the inside of this a little bit. The coating does not appear to be on the inside, at least not very far. But if it is on yours, this finish on it might make it harder for the glue to stick, and so rough it up. This one I think I'm okay. Okay, so I'm just going to now put this in, and I'm going to twist it as I go in, and that's just to spread the glue evenly. Okay, and now I'm just going to let that dry as well. Okay, so looking ahead, the next thing we can do is reinforce the launch lug. Okay, so this is the launch lug here, and as I said, this has already been glued on by the manufacturer, but they include this stick-on as a reinforcement. And so all we do with this is peel it off. Like this. And put it roughly centered here. If you get it a little bit off, it's not a big deal. It's still going to fly. Okay, now if you can, what you want to do here is instead of making it stick directly to the tube at first, is use your fingernail and first stick it to the side of the launch lug. If you go directly to trying to stick it to the body tube, you'll have an air gap in there which will make it a little weaker. Now, you'll probably get a little bit of an air gap anyway. Okay, but once you got that down, then you can smooth this along. Okay, and the same thing here. Okay, and let's smooth that one down. And when you're working with these self-adhesive decals, it's a good idea to wash your hands before doing them. I washed mine before I started building this, but probably could have gotten away with more. And that way you don't leave oily fingerprints and such underneath the stick-on stuff here. Okay, and so just work out any air bubbles. Just kind of move them over to the nearest edge. Okay, so that's done there. Now we're still waiting for the glue to dry on the motor mount. And what we can do now is the parachute. Now the way they show it here, they're tying this directly to the base of the nose cone here. Now if you want to do it this way, wait until the glue dries on this. I'm going to show you a different way that makes things a little bit more versatile. Okay, for this you're going to need a snap swivel like you find in fishing stores, which is where I got this one. The size is not critical except for the snap itself. Okay, so the swivel part back here that turns, this can be any of them. Okay, so if you have a small one or a big one, really doesn't matter. What does matter is that the snap part has to be large enough to fit around the eye of your nose cone. You may have to bend it open there. Okay, but I can do this, and I still have room to close it. Okay, and nose cones like this, they have these big base plates with the rectangular eye in them, usually take larger snap swivels. So what I'm going to do here is I'm essentially doing the same thing that they're showing in the instructions of passing the loops of the shrouds through the eye here, except that instead of passing them through the eye of the nose cone, I'm going to pass them through the swivel side of the snap swivel. Now this comes pre-assembled. All the shroud lines are attached already, but we do need to separate them. And these are in loops, so every shroud line is attached at both ends. Here's where it gets a little bit difficult to do this. Alright, so get the whole thing on camera. What I'm doing here is I'm holding the parachute at its center at the top of the canopy, and then I've got the shroud lines looped around my finger and I've pulled them taut. Okay, and so now I'm just going to pinch this off, still keeping tension on them so they don't slide on me. And now I'm going to stick all of the loops through the screw eye, or not the screw eye, the barrel eye there. Okay, and then I'll pass the whole snap swivel through so it forms this really nice neat knot there. Okay, and now it's ready to go in. The nice thing about this is that you can remove the parachute when you're not launching. So if you're just keeping this on display, you may not want to have the parachute all wadded up in here because over time it kind of assumes that shape. Or you might be able to want to put in a larger or a smaller parachute depending on how windy the day is of your launch. So this is, it looks like a 15-inch parachute, maybe even 18. Okay, and so maybe it's a windier day or you're on a small field and you want your rocket to come down a little faster. You could unsnap this and put in, say, a 12-inch parachute instead. Okay, so it just gives you some options to quickly change out your parachute as you need to. The other end of this, step 5 of the nose cone and parachute section, is to put the shock cord on here. And I could probably do that without having this come loose on me. All right, so here all you're going to do is pass the shock cord through the eyelet. All right, I'm just going to put in a couple of half hitches here, essentially a double knot. Okay, and then if I pull the rocket side of this is going to help cinch it down. And you want to use a little bit left here on the end of the knot. If you cut this down too close, it may come loose. Having this little bit of extra material here helps keep the knot intact. The other thing you can do here is take a little bit of white glue. Don't use model cement or super glue as it'll hurt the rubber. You can just take a little tiny dab of white glue here and just work that onto the knot. And that'll, once it dries, that'll just keep the knot from coming undone. Okay, so we'll set that aside. So I'm going to go ahead and take the rubber band off this. I still want to be gentle with it, as that glue may not be completely dry yet. Something you might think about is in areas where you can get to them and they won't interfere with anything, you might want to put a little bit of glue along the insides of the seams here. Just be careful that it doesn't spill out the outside. This is just going to give it a little bit more reinforcement. If I hold this up to the light, I can actually see light through the cracks of the seams here, which means that it's not completely sealed against itself. And you may not, with the brush-on glue, you may not be able to get that full seal. If you use the tube style that has more of a gel to it, that's more conducive to filling spaces. Okay, be really careful on the retaining side because you don't want to get glue up in the threads. Okay. Okay. If I hadn't put any glue in there, I would go ahead and put this retainer on to help hold everything in place. Although, for at least the first part, it may get in the way. So I think I'll wait on that. Once I've got the fins on, I will go ahead and put this on just to help hold everything in place. Okay, so looking at step 3 back up here on our fins, we need to put glue on the contact surfaces. And so this is a little bit unclear in the illustration here. So this is going to go in like this, and it's going to get shoved forward. And they actually thought ahead on this. In some kits that have this type of fin can, a lot of times they'll put the seam through where the fin goes in. It makes a weak point. By having the fin slots here away from the seams, it means you can assemble it faster. Okay, now where the actual contact is going to be made is actually mostly along the sides here. Okay, so the little tab sticking down, we don't need any glue on the bottoms of these because they don't come in contact with anything. They'll just be hanging inside. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run some glue on the inside and the underside of that fin mount. Okay, I'm going to put some up here because this is going to come in contact as well. Alright, and this is probably the trickiest part of the entire model. Because when you put these on, you need to put them on in one quick motion. Otherwise, they'll tend to try and bind and lock into place before you get them fully in. I recommend dry fitting them first, like you saw me do there, to make sure nothing's going to hang up. And just like on the fin can, you want to check for any flash on here. Okay, so any little bits of excess plastic that might get stuck. So now I'm just going to slide this in and forward very quickly, okay, until it stops. And so it should stop with the root of the fin edge here right next to the back of the fin can. So this should all be pretty flush right there. Okay, and I'm just going to do the same thing with the other ones here. So I'm going to go ahead, dry fit that. Okay, and my last fin. Alright, now on this one, we do have that mirror finish here actually on the gluing surfaces. Probably you can get away with gluing it directly. If you're going to, I would recommend using the super glue. But what I'm going to recommend is taking just a little bit of sandpaper. And it doesn't take much, and it doesn't really matter what type, so if you have fine or medium, either of those are going to be fine here. I'm just going to roughen up that surface a little bit to make sure the glue has something to stick to. Okay, you don't want to roughen up here, you want to keep the finish where it's going to be seen. Okay, and make sure I didn't do anything weird. Put that back on. Okay. So all three fins are on, all are in the right position. All right, so this time I'm going to go ahead and put this on. I'm not going to screw it in all the way just in case there's a little wet glue sitting there. And again, definitely make sure you check the threads and make sure there's no wet glue in there. But this will help just hold everything together as the whole thing dries. So I'm going to let that stand aside here. Actually, if you notice that your fins are a little bent, like this one is, for the most part you don't have to worry about it. I mean, just give it a little counter bend like this. Don't bend it too far. And if it doesn't go back all at once, don't worry about it. Just come back and do this every so often. Alright, so about 15 minutes have passed or so. Enough time to keep the fins on. And we're almost done, actually. So all we're going to do now is mount the fin can into the body tube here. And it goes into the end that has the launch guide here, the closest to it. And when you put this on, no matter which way you put it, you need to have the launch lug assembly centered between two of the fins here. Okay, so you don't want a fin sticking up right here because it'll get in the way of the launch rod. On mine, I'm going to stick the shiny fin on completely the opposite side of the launch lug. Okay, and we're going to do this kind of the same way we put the base into the nose cone. For this, use either the gel super glue or the tube type plastic cement. So you want something that's got some viscosity to it. And I'm going to do this the same way. So I'm just going to run a bead right along the inside. And this way again, as I push in the fin can, it's going to push excess glue ahead of it and not out onto the body tube. Okay, so I've got my orientation this way, and I'm just going to slide this in and just rotate it back and forth a little bit. Alright, and then eyeball it to check that I'm more or less centered. Okay, and that's done. Okay, so now I just kind of loosely wrap up the shock cord here for the moment. Put that down inside. And again, make sure you don't have any glue out here on the nose cone, or when you do this part, it's going to get stuck there. Okay, so I've got this assembled. It still needs to let the glue fully dry, but basically the rocket's done at this point. I haven't put the parachute in, but that's about it. Okay, so you put this whole rocket together, minus gluing time and drying time, in about half an hour. Okay, hope this build was fun and educational for you, and have a good launch.